Good evening and welcome to the Warren City School District Board of Education organizational meeting. Today is Tuesday, January the 4th, 2022, and the time is 6 p.m. We are at Warren G. Harding High School in the cafetorium with live stream available at warrencityschools.org. At this time, I'll call the meeting to order, and if everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And tonight we have with us the Honorable Judge James A. Frederica via Zoom. Thank you. And he will administer the oath of office to our newly elected board member, Jenna Doherty, and also to our returning board member, Regina Patterson. Mrs. Patterson, you can go first. No.
Ms. Patterson, first I want to congratulate you and wish you well in the next 4 years. And so I'll ask you now to raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Regina Patterson,
Do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
discharge my duties
discharge my duties
as Board of Education member
as a Board of Education member
in and for the Warren City School District,
in and for the Warren City School District,
Trumbull County, Ohio,
Trumbull County, Ohio,
to the best of my ability
to the best of my ability
and in accordance with the laws
and in accordance with the laws
now in effect
now in effect
and hereafter to be enacted.
and hereafter to be enacted.
Congratulations.
Yay. Congratulations. Okay, you want to have Jake come up? Yep. They're making their way over. Jenna, go ahead in front of the flag. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
First, congratulations, Ms. Doherty. You have a great opportunity to influence young people's lives, and as you start on your first 4-year term, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Okay, would you raise your right hand and place your left hand on the Bible and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Jenna Doherty,
Do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
discharge my duties
discharge my duties
as Board of Education member
as Board of Education member
in and for the Warren City School District,
in and for the Warren City School District,
Trumbull County, Ohio,
Trumbull County, Ohio,
to the best of my ability
to the best of my ability,
and in accordance with the laws
in accordance with the law
now in effect
now in effect
and hereafter to be enacted.
and hereafter to be enacted.
Congratulations.
Officially welcome. All right, very good.
Steve?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
I want to thank you for allowing me to swear in the board members. I appreciate it. I'm sorry, I give you my apologies for not being able to be there tonight, but I'm following guidelines. And I didn't know about the guidelines that I had to follow until this weekend. So please forgive me. And I hope that you'll invite me back next year or the year after, whenever you have board members to be sworn in.
Thank you very much. It's our honor, and we appreciate you giving us the time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge, and stay healthy.
Okay, goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
All right, thank you.
All right. And welcome to our newest board member. We're so happy to have you up here. And Regina, thank you for returning. And we're looking forward to a great year. Okay? All right. With that, let us have the first roll call of the new year.
Mr. Walker,
Present.
Mrs. Patterson,
Here.
Mrs. Doherty,
Here.
Mr. Fowley, Mrs. Lamperos.
Here. And at this time, I will designate a temporary chairperson for the next portion of the meeting, and that will be Mr. Julian Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. So we're going to go to agenda item number 5 on page 2. And then we're going to open nominations for president of the board for the calendar year 2022. Do you want me to read that? Should I read that? Okay. All right. So it is recommended the resolution listed below, opening the meeting to nominations for the office of president for the Warren City School District Board of Education for the calendar year 2022 be approved as submitted. Okay. Whereas the statutes require board members to elect one member of the Board of Education to serve as president. Now, therefore, as temporary chairperson, I declare that nominations for the office of president of the Warren City School District Board of Education, calendar year 2022, are now in order.
Mr. Chairperson, I would like to nominate Mr. John Fowley as president.
Thank you, Ms. Lamperos. Are there any other nominations? And if not, let's vote to close nominations for the office of president of the board for calendar year 2022.
Need a
Want
first.
me to call the roll?
No, sure.
Okay.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson? Yes. Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley? Yes. Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
All right. Let's go to agenda item number 6 on page 3. Vote in election of president of the board for calendar year 2022. It is recommended the resolution listed below to elect the president of the Warren City School District Board of Education for calendar year 2022 be approved as submitted. Whereas John Fowley has been duly nominated to serve as president of the board. Now, therefore, as temporary chairperson, I call for a vote to elect a president of the Warren City School District Board of Education for the calendar year 2022 for John Fowley.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson? Yes. Mr. Walker?
Yes. Thank you for that. And now I would like to introduce our presiding president for the 2022 calendar year, Mr. John Fowley. Mr. Fowley, the floor is yours.
Did you take your nameplate? Yeah. Yes, you have to switch. Congratulations.
Before we proceed with the meeting, I would like to thank Mrs. Lamperos, who has achieved the goal of every president of the Board of Education. She leaves both the board and the district in far better condition than the day she started. And all the board members, thank you for that, and it is greatly, greatly appreciated. Nominations for Vice President of the Board for calendar year 2022. It is recommended the resolution listed below, opening the meeting to nominations for the office of Vice President of the Warren City School District Board of Education for calendar year 2022, be approved as submitted. Whereas statutes require board members to elect one member of the board to serve as Vice President, and therefore, as President, I declare the nominations for the office of Vice President of the Warren City School District Board of Education for calendar year 2022 are now in order.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I would like to nominate Mrs. Regina Patterson as Vice President.
Thank you, Mrs. Lamperos. Are there other nominations? Hearing none, the vote will be to close nominations for the office of Vice President of the Board for calendar year 2022. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Lamperos,
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty,
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Fowley.
Yes. And Mrs. Patterson, thank you for accepting to continue your office for another year. Did we have the vote? Oh, yes. The vote for election of Vice President of the, this always seems redundant. The vote for the election of the Vice President of the Board for calendar year 2022. It is recommended the resolution listed below to elect a Vice President of the Warren City School District Board of Education for calendar year 2022 be approved as submitted. Whereas Regina Patterson has been duly nominated to serve as Vice President of the Board, now therefore as President, I call for a vote to elect a Vice President of the Warren City School District Board of Education for calendar year 2022. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Doherty,
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos,
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Fowley.
Yes. Mrs. Doherty, would you please read item 9 on page 6, just the first 5 lines?
Establishment of times, dates, and location for regular meetings for calendar year 2022. It is recommended the resolution listed below establishing board meeting times, dates, and location for calendar year 2022 be approved as submitted in Exhibit 6A.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Are there any questions or concerns from the board members? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Doherty,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos,
Yes.
Mr. Fowley.
Yes. To determine committee assignments for the calendar year 2022, I'll briefly go through this, and then I've asked Mrs. Doherty to read it in its entirety. Athletics, Mrs. Lamperos and Mr. Walker. Financial Advisory, Mrs. Doherty and myself, Mr. Fowley. Board Policies and Guidelines, Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Doherty. Legislative Liaison, Mrs. Lamperos and Mr. Walker, and the TCTC Board Representative, Mrs. Patterson. I would also like to remind those joining us via live stream that the appointments for the TCTC Board Representative is for 3 years, and that the other appointments are for 1 year. Mrs. Doherty, could you please read it in its entirety with the names?
Yes. 10, determine board committee appointments for calendar year 2022. It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding board committee appointments for calendar year 2022 be approved as submitted. Whereas to enhance efficient board, the board members are appointed by the board president to serve on standing committees, and whereas the term of such appointment is 1 year or until December 31st, whichever occurs first, except for TCTC board representation, which is a 3-year appointment concluding December 31st, 2024. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the following board members are appointed to the standing committees as stated. Athletics, Mrs. Lamperos, Mr. Walker. Financial Advisory, Mrs. Doherty, Mr. Fowley. Board Policies and Guidelines, Mrs. Doherty, Mrs. Patterson. Legislative Liaison, Mrs. Lamperos, Mr. Walker. TCTC Board Representative, Mrs. Patterson. Furthermore, from time to time, board members shall be called upon to make reports to the board as a whole and in public in regard to such standing committees' work. And finally, the members of the board are reminded under the provisions of ORC 121.22 that members of the board are prohibited from making any decisions obligating the board as a whole or with public funds when acting outside a regular or special board meeting.
Second.
Hearing a second. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. Are there any questions or concerns from the board members? Hearing none, please call the roll, Karen.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. Mrs. Lamperos, item 11 on page 9, please.
Ohio School Boards Association membership. It is recommended the resolution listed below authorizing membership in the Ohio School Boards Association for the period January 1, 2022 through December 31, 2022 be approved as submitted.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. I guess this one's me. Item 12. I'd like to ask Mrs. Lamperos to serve as our delegate and Mr. Walker to serve as the alternate, if that's all right with the two of them.
I'm perfectly fine with that.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. And I'll read this one. Ohio School Boards Association Annual Conference and Business Meeting. It is recommended the resolution listed below appointing a delegate and an alternate to the Ohio School Boards Association's Annual Conference and Business Meeting be approved as submitted.
Second?
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
And I'd like to thank Mr. Walker for serving as our delegate this year. He was our sole representative down there, and he attended a meeting with 6,000 people in order that he could cast our vote on several very important issues to the district. Mrs. Patterson, if you would read 13 on page 11.
Warren City Schools Athletic Council meetings, 2022. It is recommended the resolution listed below, establishing meetings for the Warren City Schools Athletic Council meetings for the 2022 calendar year, be approved as submitted.
Second?
Any questions or concerns? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. Mr. Walker, on page 12, item 14.
Retain legal services. It is recommended the resolution listed below to retain legal services be approved as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns from the board members? Hearing none, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. Mrs. Doherty, on page 14, item 15.
OSBA Legal Assistance Fund. It is recommended the resolution listed below joining OSBA Legal Assistance Fund for the period of January 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2022 be approved as submitted.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Questions or concerns? Hearing none, Karen, please call the roll.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. Mrs. Lamperos, on page 15, item 16.
Authorization to employ temporary personnel. It is recommended the resolution listed below authorizing the temporary employment of personnel be approved as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. Mrs. Patterson, item 17 on page 15.
Authorization to fund signatures. It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding authorization to fund signatures be approved as submitted.
Second?
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. Mr. Walker, on page 16, item 18.
Payment of bills. It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding payment of bills be approved as submitted.
Second.
Questions or concerns?
Absolutely.
Any concerns, Mrs. Cortino?
No.
Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. The superintendent of schools has advised us that there is no need for an executive session, and we see none. I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye, aye. Need to call the roll.
Okay. Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
It's unanimous. Thank you.